The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Rick Tocchet played with Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Adam Oates, the Ron Francis. Who else did he play with? He played with like every single NHL Hall of Famer, top 200 player of all time. And because of that, the Canucks are going to have the best offense in hockey. What?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to October and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also a Canucks Raider currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we get into the first episode of October, we got to thank you for tuning into Locked On Canucks because it is your Canucks every damn day. We're part of that Locked On Podcast Network. They're doing the most for sports fans across the world. And for our show, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go subscribe and like this video on YouTube. And on the podcast side, go follow us and leave a 5-star review because we ain't here without you, but we're also not here without the sponsors. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. As Kyle alluded to off the top, Rick Tocchet played with the best players in the NHL, around a lot of guys with experience. And, that experience he brought to the Canucks last season. And not only were they a much improved defensive team, but they were one of the best offensive teams in the NHL. So now we ask the question, after they bolstered their forward group in the offseason, after they just finished being one of the most dangerous offenses in the NHL, can the Canucks have the NHL's most dangerous offense this season? Let's get into that. Let's look at the competition, and let's also potentially talk about some other news notes around the NHL, including Jeremy Swayman coming to the Vancouver Canucks. What? More on that in 10 minutes. Before we get to all that, let me introduce my co-host, Kyle Bowen. What's going on, brother?
Man, oh man. This is something else, okay? How could the Vancouver Canucks, who took like 14 shots per game in the first round against the Nashville Predators and kind of at points did the same against the Oilers, have the best offense in the NHL, okay? It sounds crazy, but man, oh man, this team also signed Kiefer Sherwood and Danton Heinen, okay? Do the math. Anyways, Rick Tocchet, as alluded to earlier, has played with a lot of players, and this dude also wants to play more offense, okay? He's looking at Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, JT Miller, Jake DeBrusk, etc., Philip Hronik. Do the math. He feels as if he held this team back by only thinking about structure and defense last season, okay? So again, this hockey nerd who's played with Mario Lemieux, Ron Francis, Jagr, Recchi, Gretzky, Bork, Tkachuk, Rob Blake, Jari Kurri, Jeremy Roenick, Lindros, Leclerc, Bondra, Gonchar, and Adam Oates. That same dude who's been around all of that and also did coach Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic, Teemu Selanne, Paul Kariya. That dude, that hockey nerd, a.k.a. this hockey genius, is about to run a science experiment, a.k.a. a Tocchet science-like experiment that we haven't seen before. And I think he's going to prove a point that he is one of the hockey geniuses, yes, in the NHL. He's going to have some fun. The Canucks are going to have some fun. And I feel like they're going to let loose. Trevor Beggs, look at the depth. Look at the 12 forwards that are going to make this team. Something's got to give here, okay? For real. And think about this, too. Like, what if one of these guys don't work out? What if Sprong doesn't work out? Or, like, I don't know, maybe Sherwood isn't like the 50-goal scorer that Satir Shah thinks he is. They got Jonathan Lecker-Mackey. And maybe Atu Ratu can add some offense. There's just tools here for the Canucks to do something. And, we saw them struggle last year in the second half of the season, but we saw their power play struggle too. It comes down to a lot of things. The Pettersson thing, the blah, blah, blah. Is Miller still a number one 100-point center? But at the end of the day, I just feel like if everything goes right, yes, if everything goes right, we've heard this before, the Canucks are going to have the best offense in hockey.
Yeah, and I think there's a good chance that they finish with one of the best offenses in the NHL. And look, just for reference, last season, the Canucks scored the 6th most goals in the NHL. Okay, the teams ahead of them, the Colorado Avalanche, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Dallas Stars, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, okay? At even strength, the Canucks had the 5th best offense in the NHL with, again, Avalanche, Maple Leafs, Oilers, and Stars all ahead of them. But when you look at the competition around them and the Canucks forwards 1 through 12, I think there's a good argument that they have the deepest offense in the NHL. And I know that's it might sound like a homer take, but I'm just looking around at the competition, and I think maybe the Dallas Stars are one of the other teams that might have a better forward group 1 through 12. Maybe not so much in terms of the elite talent, but they got lots of young guys there. They got a guy like Evgeny Dadonov, like who's slated to be on their fourth line. So that's a pretty stacked offense in Dallas. But like the Colorado Avalanche, for instance, and I know they survived a lot of last season. Well, they survived all of last season without Gabriel Landeskog. But now you got Arturi Lehkonen, Gabriel Landeskog, and Valeri Nichushkin on the shelf. Look, after their first line of Duran, McKinnon, and Rantanen, it's like you got guys like named Nikolai Kovalenko, potentially in the top 6. Like, come on, man. Like, the Canucks right now, we talked about it, the forward depth. You got Miller and Pedersen down the middle. You got potentially Höglander and Sprong, guys like that on your fourth line, maybe, as well as Heinen and Sherwood. You got a lot of guys in this team. Like, look at the forward group. Does maybe every forward on this team have double-digit goal potential? That's crazy. Not to mention you got Philip Hronek and Quinn Hughes on the back end. So, look, can the Canucks offense be better than last season? Yes, I absolutely think it can. It starts with the forward group, and, there's going to be guys like Quinn Hughes who I think could level up as well, and Nils Höglander, Brock Besser. There's a lot of potential on this Canucks team to have the best offense in the NHL.
UFA Brock Besser. That's a new Brock Besser that we haven't seen before, okay? RFA or pending RFA, Nils Höglander. UFA, Daniel Sprong, blah, blah, blah. There's also internal motivation for some individual players here to go get paid, to go make that money. Talk about that internal vision as well. I think Elias Pettersson wants to prove a point. I think JT Miller wants to prove a point too. Straight up. That he's still that dog. He's still that 100-point guy. This is not a fluke. I can do this at age 32. You know what I'm saying? And, bro, it comes down to the power play. And a lot of it does rest on, Quinn Hughes, but again, Elias Pettersson. Again, if all goes well, this offense could be lethal. Now, Trevor, do you think that Tocchet will be patient, though? Like, think about what the Canucks are dealing with here, okay? They're going into the season with Vincent Desharnais this guy's going to get 17 minutes a game, okay? For real. Straight up, okay? You got the whole Demko thing not a net. Like, do you think Tocchet will be patient in sticking with this new offensive philosophy that he's dying to implement? Because, again, I think this guy's a hockey nerd. I think this guy lost a lot of sleep last year knowing that in the second half of the season, he didn't tell the boys to loosen up, play hockey. He didn't lean into the skills of his best players. He just rather, at the time, had them, just worry about the staples, dump it in. There was a lot of that happening. Look at what was happening in Game 6 and Game 7 against the Oilers. A lot of gaining the neutral zone and dumping it in. Yeah. And not having to speed the forecheck. Like, with him having a different mindset and wanting to be a better rush team, and again, just leaning on a new era of culture, or a new type of culture for the Canucks, okay? You got Elias Pettersson. You're paying this guy $11.6 million, okay? You're not paying this guy to dump and chase. You want to lean into what that guy is. Do you think he will be patient, though? Like, let's say the Canucks get off to a slow start. There's a lot of moving parts here. Do you see Tocchet sticking through with this and still allowing this group of players to open it up?
I'm cautiously optimistic because, we heard him say this time and time again in the playoffs last year. And after the Canucks got eliminated, that the team was too safe. Like you said, Kyle, they did way too much dump and chasing. And for a team with as much talent as the Canucks, they don't need to dump and chase at the rate that they were doing it. So I'm cautiously optimistic that he's going to stick to the new offensive philosophy. That being said, why I'm not optimistic that he's going to keep it up is just because of the goaltending situation. Right? You don't have Thatcher Demko in net. Is that going to change the way that Tocchet and the staff coach at the beginning of the season in terms of maybe adjustments to the structure and guys potentially maybe not pinching up as much and them not encouraging as much? Look, I've said it before. I think it would be a mistake to limit the offense just because you have Shilovs and Lankinen in there. I think you do need to open things up because the structure was implemented last season. But this team is going to win games and be one of the best teams in the NHL because of the offense, not necessarily because of the defense and the goaltending.
Wow. That's it's fascinating to go down that route and say something like that out loud because the Canucks have only been winning for 24 seconds, okay? Whereas Ryan Henderson is saying like 35 seconds. They've barely been there, and they only got good for 30 seconds because they have a deep team and an intelligent team. Like, there's a lot of players on this team that have high hockey IQ. And they were able to understand the message that Tocchet and Foote were trying to implement. And it was all around structure and getting the puck out and limiting scoring chances and being efficient off the rush whenever they could be, and all those things worked out. And for them to immediately, after one loss and after one successful season, but one series loss to the Oilers, completely attempt to switch up their philosophy because they totally believe that this team has it in their DNA now after 22 seconds of scientific implementation that they can hold it down defensively. Again, it's fascinating, but I'm going to go back to Rick Tocchet again. I don't think I'm over exaggerating when I'm talking about a 900-point NHL player, a guy who played pretty much every style of hockey to get to those 900 points, including, being good defensively and being an SOB to play against and being tough as F, being that guy. But again, I'm not exaggerating with who he played with and who he was around. Again, like what other 900-point NHL player who's a head coach was surrounded by literally 2 or 3 handfuls of like the best 200 players of all time, including, 2 of the best 3 players of all time, and Lemieux and Gretzky. You know what I'm saying? Like this guy, and we've seen it. We hear the way this guy talks. He's so enthusiastic about the game of hockey. Like this guy loves hockey more than anyone. He's in the 0.0001% when it comes to his admiration for the game of hockey. Like I think his ability to have all those experiences and now not have to coach the Arizona Coyotes or like the 2009 Tampa Bay Lightning is, again, a really fascinating thing to look into this season. And with this player group that he has in front of him, including, Quinn Hughes, one of the best offensive defensemen of all time, soon to be JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, there's just something magical about to happen. Okay. And now this is where I'm going to exaggerate, but if Rick Tocchet can flip the script and become an offensive head coach and do wonders with this deep forward group and a potentially lethal power play, hopefully, because this power play did suck ass last season. But let's say that switches. If all those things go well, bro, is there a world where Rick Tocchet can win Coach of the Year again? Not that it matters. Like I'm looking for individual trophies. All I want is a Conn Smythe and a Stanley Cup, straight up. I don't care about no more individual trophies. But if he's able to flip the script and like be successful by turning this structure-based, puzzle-based team into like a lethally, like just a crazy offensive team, the book is going to be out there on Rick Tocchet that this guy's a hockey genius.
Yeah, and again, like you said, he's been surrounded by a lot of elite talent in his life. Look, I think one of the interesting things about the Canucks right now is I do think a lot of people are sleeping on the Canucks, and maybe Beggsy and Bowen here at Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. Maybe we're being a bit too high on this team, but again, I think there's just a lot to like about the pieces in place. And look, you need obviously a guy like Pettersson to bounce back, but the depth is there on this team. And they were already one of the best offensive teams in the NHL last season, even though they, drastically declined in the latter half of the season. And even though their power play kind of fell off a cliff,
So bad.
they still finished with like the 5th best, 6th best offense in the NHL, depending on what metric you look at. So I don't think it's a crazy stretch to say that this team could be one of the best offensive teams in the NHL with Rick Tocchet at the helm and with the additions that they made to this team in the offseason. Kyle, let's cut to break here. Let's shout out our friends at FanDuel.
Hey, one thing I want to say, okay? Rick Tocchet, 900 points in the NHL, played with all those guys, won Stanley Cups, and now has a Coach of the Year. Does he need to win? Does he need to win a Stanley Cup to like be in the Hall of Fame? Like, I feel like this guy's Mr. Hockey. Like, I don't know where he'd fit in, but think about like that's a crazy resume already. Multiple Stanley Cups, if I'm correct. Maybe only has one. I don't know how many Stanley Cups this guy has. Okay, but assistant coach, he's won a Stanley Cup as well, so he does have multiple Stanley Cups. He has over 900 points, and now he was one of Jack Adams. Like, who else has that on his resume?
Yeah, no, it's a pretty stacked resume, that's for sure. He's won 1 Stanley Cup in his career at the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, you know what? It's early on in his coaching tenure.
Yeah.
It's early on in his coaching tenure, so I don't want to be pumping this guy to the Hall of Fame quite yet.
Fair enough,
Let's see him win a Stanley Cup for your Vancouver Canucks first. On the other side, let's touch on some other news notes regarding your Vancouver Canucks. Maybe a little bit on Jeremy Swayman as well. That and more coming up after we shout out our friends over at FanDuel. All right, you know the deal. Whether you're betting on NHL, NFL, or whatever it is, make sure you go check out FanDuel. Start your season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And man, oh man, I like to bring this up from time to time because the Canucks still being incredibly disrespected by our friends at FanDuel. And hey, maybe they're trying to help you out with a big win on the Vancouver Canucks. So we're talking about the team having potentially the best offense in the NHL. They are tied for 13th overall in terms of Stanley Cup betting odds heading into the season at plus 2,300. Okay, they're tied with the LA Kings for this 13 bet cup odds. Boston, Tampa Bay, Nashville, Toronto, Carolina, Vegas, New York, Rangers, Dallas Stars, Colorado Avalanche, New Jersey Devils, Florida Panthers, and Edmonton Oilers are all teams with better odds than the Vancouver Canucks. To me, that is wild. So there's some value on the Vancouver Canucks if you're a betting man, but I think the message is Vancouver Canucks, despite our optimism, are being disrespected around the NHL right now. But hey, at FanDuel, maybe they're trying to help you out, man. So if you want to place that bet, make sure you go do so at FanDuel.com.
Bada bing, bada boom. People, we back doing this, and that's gassing up the Vancouver Canucks, okay? Kyle Bound, Trevor Beggs, always high on the Vancouver Canucks, always high in general. It's always 420 when it's ever when it is Beggsy and Ballard, okay? The OGs know. Locked On Canucks started at 4:20 p.m. every day, and as Jimmy Honeywell, okay? Again, I don't know what this guy does for work, but with that name, bro, 11:45 at night on a Wednesday, I might be seeing this guy on my screen, okay? Accidentally, Jimmy Honeywell. And he's nice enough to send Trevor's kid a Hot Wheel. And he's saying that we are not too high on this team for sure, okay? Again, we're talking about the Canucks having one of the best offenses in hockey. We're talking about, their elite talent and Rick Tocchet being around elite talent for like 40 years in hockey. Him hockey nerding out, his philosophy changing. Will he be able to send a message that was different than last year's message to this team? And will this team listen? I think so. With all that being said, Trevor, you mentioned this briefly. You talked about how every single player on this team could have double digits in goals, all that jazz. And I think that is so important. I think, going into this season, like the love affair that we're having with Kiefer Sherwood and Daniel Sprong and Danton Heinen is it's wonderful, but also we got to be a little cautious here. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if these guys were that damn good and that damn important, last time I checked, I don't think they're getting paid that damn much. Yeah, straight up, they aren't. But we got them all, and apparently we have the best offense in hockey. Out of those three players, like who do you think has the biggest impact offensively? I think from the jump, you could say something like Daniel Sprong, but Heinen might be playing with Brock Besser and JT Miller. Bro, I heard Satir Shah talk about how this guy has the ends with the Canucks. He's talking about how Kiefer Sherwood could be DeBrusk and Pettersson's lineman. Like again, who out of those guys raises the floor of this, or raises the ceiling of this Canucks offense?
Yeah, it's honestly a fascinating question because I think from an efficiency standpoint, it's going to be Daniel Sprong, but is he going to get the ice time? He's been kind of, not getting in other organizations, right? Is he still going to be, if he's an 11-minute a game player, he might get 40 points to be one of the most efficient guys in the NHL. But a guy like Danton Heinen, like you said, if he plays with Miller and Besser, could see way more opportunity and could maybe push 50 plus points the first time in his career. I think of those three, Sherwood's probably the biggest long shot to have the most points. I think Danton Heinen is probably the front runner because of the opportunity he's going to get off the bat. And he's proven in the past that he can play with elite players. And, if he sticks around with Miller and Besser for, most of the season, I could see him easily get into that 20-goal, 50-point range. But that being said, if Daniel Sprong can actually earn more minutes, like this guy's got the highest ceiling of the three of them. Again, this guy had, 2 years ago in Seattle, 21 goals, 46 points, playing in a fourth line role. You get this guy top 6 minutes, he could be a 60-point player, but I'm just not sure if he's going to get that opportunity.
Man, it's one of those things. It's so funny how, you and I are doing this episode when if we flash back to, again, April, May, we're just so pissed off at the Canucks just dumping and chasing and not taking enough chances and playing it super safe. And then we go into July 1st and we want Jake Gensel, right? Jake Gensel. And who do we end up with? We end up with, Sherwood, Heinen, Sprong later on, and we also end up with Jake DeBrusk, a guy who a lot of people are high on, an excellent player, a good two-way player, smart player from the Boston system, a guy who can plug and play, but he's not Jake Gensel statistically. And at the end of the day, we talked about this offense being great and historic, and man, oh man, the Canucks have never had it better. And I feel as if it's safe to say that there's still a bit of a question to be asked in regards to Pettersson finding chemistry with DeBrusk and it being the ideal fit. Because when we're talking about Mr. 11.6 and we're talking about him potentially getting Jake Gensel and then getting only Jake DeBrusk, there is a bit of a drop off there when it comes to tiers. And yeah, for this offense to take the next step, we need Elias Pettersson to be optimal, the 100-point player that we think he is. And it's not a guarantee.
No, it's not a guarantee. And even there's, I know some comments here. Shout out to all our commenters here on Locked On Canucks watching us live on YouTube. Still some skepticism about Pettersson. And, has he looked that great in the preseason? I would say probably not, but it's also the preseason. These guys are mainly going at 20, 25% here. But yeah, I think there's still a huge question mark with Pettersson. And does he have chemistry with DeBrusk? I mean, come on. They played one preseason game together against an AHL Calgary Flames squad, but looked great with some of the puck movement that they were doing. They looked really good at training camp together too. So it's a question mark, but there's lots of question marks. This is October 1st that we're recording the show. So I still think those guys should get a healthy run of games together before we can add final judgment to what they're going to be here this season.
I wonder if there was any internal pressure on Rick Tocchet. And this pressure could have came from management or just himself, because Rick Tocchet, again, is a hockey nerd. Like, the way he observes the game and observes this lineup, it's probably, it's probably extreme. Again, this guy loves the game of hockey. And I wonder if this guy's thinking to himself, it's important for, again, this team to be more offensive first, because Mr. 11.6 is Elias Pettersson. And you also have JT Miller. And there's a potential for this team. Again, it's not Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. It'll never be that, because those two are, going to go down as two of the top 10 players of all time based on what they've been doing. But having JT Miller and Elias Pettersson down the middle as your 1-2 punch in the center position has a coach like Tocchet believe that he needs to be more offensive. If you're not leaning into the offense and the attack and the strike first mentality when those two are your number one centers, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
you are.
Yeah, I agree. And look, again, for all the skepticism about Pettersson, for me, really, it was like a 2-month blip. At the end of January, he was the most efficient points per 60 player in the entire league. So again, I think,
Wow.
And Miller obviously has been, he transformed his game last season. Not only was he putting up the points, but he was taking on the tough matchups. I mean, they are two of the best players in the NHL. And I'm pretty confident that we're going to see something close to the best versions of them. You're not going to get a game 1 through 82. There's going to be ebbs and flows, but I still think they're two of the best centers in the NHL right now. Probably both, what do you call Kyle, top 15 centers in the league? Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say, but let's, okay, bro, but if Pettersson hits, again, the Canucks have not seen that yet. We saw Miller and Pettersson hit together when they were pretty much on the same line, the lotto line. But if Pettersson and Miller hit down the middle for this team, we haven't seen that version of the Canucks, and that this oozes explosive offense, okay? On that note, though, look at this comment from Red Risotto, okay? Red Risotto, my guy, all over the place with the Canucks, emotional sometimes, okay? This guy didn't believe that Quinn Hughes had it in him. I remember 12 months ago. And look what happened. And look at what he's saying now about Rick Tocchet, okay? Rick Tocchet did not build this team last year. It was handed to him. He hasn't done anything more than destroy 2 goalies and ice the least offensive playoff team in NHL history. Red Risotto, man, what time is it? Aren't you from Montreal? What's going on in Montreal, okay? Did they overcook your poutine? Did they do that? That being said, though, again, Trevor, you and I are having this conversation 5 months after, 6 months after. Again, the Canucks were one of the least explosive teams offensively in NHL history when it comes to a first round playoff performance. I think they won a series with the least amount of shots.
Yeah, they did. And I think that's why, there's going to be a lot of judgment on how Tocchet handles this season, right? We hear all the talk about how they want to be a more offensive team, but you saw in the playoffs last year, I think it was a mix of, the team having the structure down, but then being too safe. And I think Tocchet mentioned during the playoffs that his team was playing too safe, and they still didn't really kick things into high gear. So sometimes it's hard to make that switch when you're kind of in the thick of the playoffs. But we'll see how things transpire here at the beginning of the season. But I expect, based on Tocchet's ability to adapt and the offensive depth on this team, that this could be probably one of the most dangerous offensive teams in the NHL. Kyle, let's cut to a quick break on the other side, get to a couple comments, maybe talk a bit about Jeremy Swayman coming to the Vancouver Canucks. What?
Whoa!
More about that on the other side after we shout out our friends over at Game Time. All right. It's October, which means Canucks games are on the horizon. If you're looking to buy Canucks tickets, make sure you go check out some Canucks tickets on Game Time, okay? They got this new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks, they filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, all right? On that app, okay, you got the seat views, you got the lowest price guarantee, which means Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets on another app. And they got that Game Time ticket coverage, okay? The most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Wow. So make sure you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Go down that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
We back doing this, and that's talking about your Vancouver Canucks and completely gassing them up. And Trevor, you know why we do this, okay? And this is why you got to hit the like button, okay? Because you're not going to find a channel like this anywhere else. Yeah, there's 18,467 million Canucks podcasts and YouTube channels out there. But there's not one out there that has more West Coast bias than us. Straight up. We're always assuming the best here. We got it. This is escapism for us. And I want a championship. There's no city in sports that deserves the best more than the city of Vancouver, okay? For real. The Canucks will have the best offense in hockey. No offense to the rest of the NHL fan base. Speaking of which, Ashneil Lal, okay? Let's talk about the Oilers. Ashneil Lal, I went to high school with this guy, okay? Good influence, okay? Good Fijian brother. That's all I'll say about him. I'm not gonna get rude. I'm not gonna tell y'all to attack him in the comments. I'm not that type of guy. But F the Oilers. Straight up. Smash the like button for that, okay? Anyways, Begsy, you want to talk about how Jeremy Swayman and his situation with the Boston Bruins and the 64 million reasons why, he hasn't signed with the Boston Bruins is somehow connected to Thatcher Demko and the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, I'm just checking it out there, right? Or this guy is firmly in trade rumors now. It's obviously gotten very messy with Boston, and what a dumb thing to do by Cam Neely, former Vancouver Canuck Cam Neely, to drop that in the media. It's just created this toxic situation where, again, Boston chose Swayman as their guy, and now they're disrespecting him. It's crazy, and I think one of the biggest question marks the Vancouver Canucks entering the season is in net. And look, I know we believe in Shelovs. It's nice to have Lankinen in the fold now, so you got a bit more depth there. But is there a potential world where maybe the Canucks are a team that could acquire Jeremy Swayman? Is there any chance, man? Is there any chance?
Okay, this is your reporter. Like, I got to put the reporter hat on because I got to feed my children and get clicks, man. Come on, Trevor. Keep it real. Look at your heart. Okay? Don't listen to your mind. Listen to your heart. This is how the Jeremy Swayman thing connects to Thatcher Demko. Okay? There's no trade happening here, ever. Okay? Because we already got Archer Shelovs. Okay? For real. But at the end of the day, Jeremy Swayman holding out, and let's say he gets his way. Let's say the Boston Bruins struggle early in the regular season, and they're forced to, bend over backwards and a half, get on their knees for Jeremy Swayman, okay? And give him whatever he wants. Let's say Jeremy Swayman does reset the goaltending market. That means, for real, because we want everything to go well on our end, okay? We just talked about the West Coast bias, okay? We want to assume that everything's going to go right. And if that's the case, Demko comes back, and he's still elite. He's still that number one guy. You know what I'm saying? And if Swayman has reset the market in July of what? That would be 2026. I'm telling you, if the market's been reset, Thatcher Demko with Shelovs behind him, and the Canucks having to deal with Oliver Ekman-Larsson's cap hit and a future new deal with Quinn Hughes, there's no way Thatcher Demko signs with the Vancouver Canucks. Because again, we expect this guy to be elite, right? Uber elite, the goaltender right behind Vasilevsky. If Swayman's getting paid like 9, 10, $11 million, Demko's getting the same thing. And that's why Swayman's ordeal with Boston connects somehow, some way with the Vancouver Canucks. Like, if he gets his way, we are seeing the end of Thatcher Demko in Vancouver post 2026.
Yeah, and here's why I think the Swayman contract negotiation is just so interesting too, right? It's like this guy has never been a full starter in a season, and he's asking for $8 million. But look, the cap is going up drastically, right? It went up drastically last season. Is projected to keep going up at a pretty good pace here. And it's been about 10 years since guys like Carey Price, Sergei Bobrovsky signed for like $10 million a season, when the cap was closer to 80 million instead of 90 million bucks, right? So is there a world where a guy like Demko is like, I think 10 plus easily if he kind of continues on the rate he's going by the summer of 2026 there? Maybe it's even like 11 million. So again, there's be more cost certainty, obviously with a guy like Shilovs, but again, we're talking about 19 games of NHL experience. If you get a guy like Swayman in that 8-ish range, again, there's that unproven commodity aspect of he has never been a full starter in a season, but neither has Thatcher Demko because he has to stay healthy. So that's why I find it to be a bit of an interesting debate. Look, I've been a Demko believer, every day. Know this, Kyle, you know this. I've been pumping Demko's tires since 2014, since the Canucks drafted him. But that being said, he's going to come out a pretty massive deal in 2 years' time. And you got a guy in Swayman who's probably going to cost a couple $1 million less.
Let's answer this question from Kurt Richardson, okay? Because you're making a lot of sense. I think we're all making a lot of sense. I think we're all confused on the Swayman situation, the potential dollar amount, and overall, like, a goalie's importance to the team relative to the cap hit. Because one year it's Aiden Hill winning the Stanley Cup, and then the next it's Sergei Bobrovsky who's making $10 million winning a Stanley Cup and being a big part of that. Real talk, if it's not for Connor McDavid breaking like Mario Lemieux-like numbers or being the first guy to be like Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky, Bobrovsky's winning the Conn Smythe. Potentially. And he's getting paid a lot of money. So this whole ordeal with, again, the importance of a really good goaltender and a big amount of the cap going to that guy is all over the spectrum when you, again, look at the grand scheme of things of who's winning a Stanley Cup as a goaltender. Like, who was it a couple of years ago for Colorado? Like, wasn't it Darcy Kemper?
Darcy Kemper, but he played really well. He played well in those playoffs, but he was also injured in the back of his first series. So
it's like all over the place. It really is. But at the end of the day, Kurt Richardson is saying no goalie should make $10+ million. Let's say he dials that back. No goalie should be making $9+ million, whatever the number is. Like, talk to me about where your mind is when it comes to the importance of having one of the best guys on your team and also paying that guy like he's one of the best players in all of hockey. Because again, Demko, if all goes well and his surgery goes well and his popolitis, Peturius, whatever thing's broken in him gets fixed and he's all good, if he's back to being elite and Vesna-like, bro, he's making that money. So dial it in, Trevor. Talk to me, okay? Because I don't see it happening. I think Demko's on his last legs with the Canucks because of that. But where do you see everything goaltending, everything NHL, and everything with the Vancouver Canucks?
It goes both. Like, you need a good goalie to win no matter what. But as we've seen, the NHL, it can be weird. You can't have the guy kind of come out of nowhere, like an Aiden Hill or even like a Stuart Skinner to an extent. And help your team almost win a cup or get close to winning a cup. Like Bobrovsky signed that contract, is one of the best goalies in the NHL, sucked for a couple of years, and all of a sudden he's great again. But I look at Tampa Bay with Andre Vasilevsky. Like, you got one of the most consistent guys in your net. And what did Tampa do? They won back-to-back cups. I kind of see Demko as that guy if he's able to stay healthy. So it's like, you probably, whether it's the Canucks or somebody else, you probably buck up and pay him. But a lot of it's going to depend on what Artur Shilovs does, right? If Shilovs starts to develop into the next Demko, then why would you pay Demko an absorbent amount of money when you got a guy like Shilovs in that? So I think if Shilovs doesn't develop and Demko continues to be that guy, you probably pay him the money in that 10 million range, right? Which is going to be crazy for the Vancouver Canucks, their cap situation. But by the time we get to the summer of 2026, you still have the OEL contract on the book. So yeah, it's a tough situation for your Canucks. I'm not sure exactly what the answer is, but I think it comes down to Artur Shilovs more than anything else.
And again, we talk about the whole Bobrovsky thing, getting paid $10 million. So last time I checked, he's been the number one goaltender for the team that played in the Stanley Cup Finals for 2 years in a row. What a position. Who knows what the number is going to be for Swayman? Who knows what the number is going to be for Demko in 2 years' time? But yeah, the whole Swayman thing is just it connects to not only the Canucks but every single team in hockey. Because again, he's trying to reset the market. I feel like this guy read a book on like empowerment and changing the course for civilians around you, and he's trying to do something bigger than the game of hockey. And it's like, dude, relax. You've played 40 games. You know what I'm saying? Relax. Or 80 games, whatever the number is. But again, to have Cam Neely say what he said at the press conference yesterday was entertaining as F, for real. Like that was crazy. I think their GM talked about the Spit and Chicklets podcast like a week before that as well. It's been like WWE, like very Vince McMahon against his wrestlers, like crazy. And F Boston, okay? Anyways, Kyle Bound, Trevor Beggs talking about your Canucks and Jeremy Swayman. What? And also talking about this team potentially having the best offense in the NHL. Tocchet, the philosophy, Tocchet science, taking a new level this season. And I think Rick Tocchet's going to prove that last year wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke, and that he is actually one of the coolest people to ever be involved in the NHL. If there was a category for cool people to get into the Hall of Fame, get him in there. But I think because of what he's about to do for the Vancouver Canucks, it's going to add to his legacy, and he's going to be known as, again, like top 10 most important pieces in hockey. What? Hey, do the math. It's Rick Tocchet. Anyways, speaking of math, hit the like button, okay? The like button really does help us out. We've come to the end of the show. Christmas is coming up. Boom, bam. Do the math. Trevor Beggs is married. I got a girlfriend. Bro, come on, man. It's tough out here sometimes, man. For real. Yeah, I don't even know what they want this, they want that, they want this, then they don't want this, and they want, you know what I'm saying? So the likes go a long way for guys like Beggsy and I. Appreciate you and you and you and you. Go Canucks. It's October. Hockey's back. Beggsy, sign us out.
Hey. Shout out to the everydayers, the occasional listeners, the first-time listeners, the new subscribers, and those of you who join us on the live show on YouTube. Whenever you're listening. We appreciate the hell out of you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks. Coming up this week, I think some things we want to get into include potential targets on the waiver wire, maybe more targets in terms of defensive trade for your Vancouver Canucks. All that and more will get you covered on all the news notes regarding your Vancouver Canucks as we inch closer to the regular season. But for now, we got to get out of here. I'm Trevor Beggs. That guy's Kyle Bound, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Peace.